Real people, real opinions, real talk radio. The multi-award-winning Niall Boylan Show.
Classic hits.
Speaking of holidays, by the way, I suppose modest supports for the country's airports, and none of the airlines will leave the aviation sector disappointed as they continue to be hammered by the COVID costs. And the Minister for Expenditure and Reform, Michael McGrath, said that support packages of 10 million is being made available for Shannon and Cork airports to address the changes, but did not specify what that would actually entail. Now, to talk to us more a little bit about travel, because we all miss going on our holly bags, is Eoghan Corry, who's a travel expert. Good afternoon to you, Eoghan.
Good afternoon.
It wasn't great news yesterday in the budget for the travel industry. It's on its knees. I mean, they're seeing about probably a 90% reduction on what they would have saw passenger-wise last year. 20 million passengers down because we're not heading away to our favourite sunspots. What is going to happen now? Because I heard Aer Lingus are now pleading with the government, more or less, to say, look, can you give us a plan? Because we need to start selling summer seats for next year, and there's no point in selling them if we have to give everyone their money back again. So what's going to happen?
That's pretty much it. You've summed it up. Aer Lingus last week they put up their summer 2021 schedule. It's an ambitious one. It would have the frequency of flights we'd have remembered from 2019, 3 flights daily to Malaga, all of those sort of things. It was quite optimistic. I went on to them and said, do you expect to fly these? And they said that we're not selling anything we don't expect to fly. But what they were looking for really was some sort of assurance from the government that they wouldn't be arbitrarily reacting to news and bringing in travel bans, the farcical green list that came in. You might remember.
There is no green list at the moment.
Well, there were no countries with no airports in it. That was supposed to be replaced yesterday by something more coherent, a traffic light system. The traffic light system was panned by the entire aviation industry as soon as it was published, because it reduced the lead-in period for new announcements, which was recommended by the EU Commission. It went to the Minister to be 2 weeks. The member state says, no, 24 hours. 24 hours is no way to make any plans.
No, you can't, because if I want to go on a holiday and I'm still only due, say, 2 weeks off for the year, and I want to go on a holiday to Spain for 2 weeks, and I book it, and 2 weeks later that goes onto the red list, so to speak, or the red traffic light, well, then I need 4 weeks off work. My employer's not going to be very pleased with that. So it's just never going to work. And the way we're doing it at the moment, the waking up every morning and making decisions strategy is not going to work for industry. It's not going to work for the aviation authority, and the concern now is that they're losing so much money, and many of these airlines are going to go bust.
Big questions over very, very well funded airlines. For instance, Easyjet at the weekend talking about the trouble they're going to run into if they don't get a summer 2021 season. They're one of the best managed, best funded airlines in Europe. Loads of cash, but they're not going to do 2 summers without running out of it. A lot of the airlines that were in trouble are getting a lot of state aid, Norwegian, Alitalia, people like that. It's a question of how long the governments will continue to fork out when they don't get summer 2021. It's all now about summer 2021. The winter has been written off. The Ryanair reaction to yesterday was sort of to give it a cautious welcome and say the government needs to implement this now. But Ryanair are really going to bring the traffic to and from Ireland down to a dribble if they don't get some sort of something to lift the demand. And obviously Cork and Shannon airports are casualties of that. But the sort of amazing prices, that guy who emailed in saying his neighbour was going on holidays, the prices people are paying is $14.99 to the Canary Islands.
I know. I mean, if you're unemployed or got the time off work, I mean, you'd be on the pig's back, wouldn't you, at the moment? Because of course, then you don't have to worry too much about isolating because you don't have to get back to work.
Aer Lingus' American flights are €99. I last saw a price like
€99 the States, but you can't go. You're not allowed.
Yeah, it's on the internet for next January and February.
So who can go to America at the moment? Only American citizens, I imagine.
Absolutely, nobody can go. There is that small proviso, but they're expecting things to have changed. Hopefully, the light will start shining on America again after the election in November.
Well, Trump has promised to open America again as soon as he gets re-elected now, but we'll have to wait and see what happens there.
I think there's more likelihood the other crowd will open. But anyway, the point is that the fares are amazing. They're on sale, but the demand isn't there. And it's not government subsidies. It's not the $5 million to Cork and Shannon airports in the budget yesterday that will keep the things moving. It's the fact that the consumer demand comes back. There are enough problems with that, by the way, with people's fears about coronavirus. Is flying safe? My argument over and over and over again is it's safer than on an aircraft than on an operation.
Well, I mean, look, the airline industry for years, particularly since 9/11, are experts in tracking and tracing because, of course,
they're great at safety.
Well, absolutely. Well, they've always had people's information. They can tell you who's on the plane, where they were sitting, etc., etc. So they've always, the airports or the airlines have been practicing that for years before anyone else ever did it. But I suppose here's the thing, and I know you're not a virologist and you're not an epidemiologist, but I mean, what do you think we should do at this stage? You know, every day we don't seem to have a plan. Only today, for example, to give you an example of how they're speaking from both sides of their mouth, Leo Varadkar was condemning Northern Ireland. When I say condemning, saying, no, well, we won't be closing schools because that's not a good idea. And then 5 minutes later, the Irish Independent lead with an article saying the government, this idea of closing the schools for the midterm for an extra week is back on the agenda again. Now, I don't know who said that in government, but it seems like they're all arguing with each other. Nobody's making up their minds. So where is that going to leave us? What do you think should happen when it comes to tourism? Because it's an important part of our economy. What do you think should happen?
Well, I'm in enough trouble with my commentary on aviation and tourism without moving into medical. I won't make any opinion on that.
But I'm asking you as an aviation expert.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. What I see is we're moving into a cycle of coronavirus popping up, rates popping up, being locked down, going back down again. Now, that's not just confined to Ireland and its counties. It's all over Europe, the regions of Europe. It's whack-a-mole. The thing pops up, you hit it over the head, it goes down again. So what are we looking at for the winter? Bouncing in and out of lockdown. And that will apply to the people, the counties we're flying out of in Ireland, and it will apply to the regions that we're flying into. What we needed to happen yesterday, and it didn't happen, was Europe to sit down and say, let's regionalise, let's treat Lanzarote as a region, not part of Spain. And let's look at the rates in Lanzarote, which are much lower than the rest of Spain, and then draw up our strategy to say, if it's safer to go to, if the case rates are low, Lanzarote should be in a position to accept visitors. And stop pulling back up the borders that we all thought were gone, because Europe is a region. Europe is an economy. The tourism of Europe affects us all. The agriculture of Europe affects us.
Well, the last time I looked, we signed up for free movement the last time I looked, but that doesn't seem to be the case. But I mean,
and that's come under stress, and let's get free movement back, but let's do it safely, and let's follow what the European Centre of Disease Control are doing, which is monitoring it on a regional basis. The whole
because the industry is so important, and the tourism industry, the aviation industry, which employs a lot of people, there's a lot of money invested in aviation, and you know the price of those planes is not cheap to be sitting on tarmac. I'm pretty sure it's not good for the engines, not being maybe they're being warmed up every morning. I don't know, but I mean, surely at this point, here we are 8 months down the road, or almost 8 months down the road. Surely at this point we should have the technology. There's machines out there that we could test people as they come in from countries. Say if you're coming from a country like America that might have high cases, or Spain or France, that you come in from those countries, you get a little temperature test, and we just stick a swab in your mouth. 5 minutes later in a machine, yeah, you're grand, off you go. You're not great, off you go to City West or go home, whichever. So surely we can do that. And we can allow tourism back into all the countries around Europe by testing people coming in and out of countries. There has to be an efficient way of doing that. We can do it with custom control. We can do it with immigration control. Why not do a testing control?
As usual, you made 3 or 4 really interesting points in the lead into that. One of them is on the aircraft. They have to be warmed up. They have to be flown, or they have to be recertified. It's one of the reasons Ryanair is keeping aircraft in the air with 4 passengers on board. It's easier to do that than to recertify your pilots, which have to go back in a simulator if they're not flying, and the aircraft, which have to be recertified if they're not flying, and it costs a fortune to store. It means that the likes of Ryanair has been keeping a service open when it's been uneconomic. onto the testing. There is no confidence in testing. The medics have all, more or less from the beginning, said antigen testing, which is the real short-term thing, it doesn't have much merit from where they're looking, and they're also questioning the PCR testing, which is the more elaborate one. It's a point in time. So unless the medics all get together and say, we trust the testing, it's of no use. Everyone in aviation, everyone in tourism just wants that solution that you've just proposed. Go to the airport, swab, you're clean to fly. But it's not within sight. It's not going to trundle down.
Well, at the moment, the antigen testing is 97%. Now, I know there's that 3%. PCR testing has a 1% positive, false positive rate as well. But realistically, we're never going to get something that's 100%. I don't know of a test in anything that's 100%. So we saw that with the cervical cancer scandal going back a few years ago. There's always going to be margins of error. So there has to be a point where we have a trade-off, for the economy, for people's lives, for our quality of lives, with a small margin of error.
And who's going to pay for it? Because obviously they're all looking for the very cheap antigen test, the €5, the €10 one.
Yeah.
Whereas most of what's going around now is about 100, 130 if you go into the Royal College of Surgeons to get it done for your pre-test to fly to Germany. So we aren't at the stage where the confidence is there. We aren't at the stage where the medics and the people who are making the decisions, advising the government, have that confidence in testing. Would that we were. Would the temperature testing, which worked during SARS and was really being used early in this, had worked, we're still chasing the solution. In history, every single pandemic, they've always been started off by looking in the wrong direction. Back to 1918, they thought it was bacteria. 1832, cholera, they thought it was the air. They didn't look in the water. I think when you look back at COVID-19, people would say the first 6 months were spent chasing the wrong solutions. We haven't gotten near the solution yet. Back to travel. We need to keep emphasising again and again and again that what is spreading the virus is not international travel. It's less than 2%. And if we keep our borders open and our planes in the air, the economies work. Not just the economies, trading gets done, essential services move. 43% of the people who work in Irish Health are from outside the country. Philippine nurses, Pakistani, Indian doctors. All of that disconnection is not being helped by the fact that we have this attitude, which makes travel more difficult.
And by the way, that's going to be more difficult for Christmas. Sorry for rushing you, but the travel is going to be more difficult at Christmas.
Sort the virus out.
Because at Christmas time, of course, you've got sons and daughters living in Australia, America, across the world. You've got people who live here, by the way, from Poland and other Eastern European countries wanting to go home. That is going to be a mess at Christmas.
This is a very different country from the one you and I grew up in. 17% of Irish people were born abroad. They haven't seen cousins, brothers, nephews, nieces. And when you have a clear data which shows that international travel is not responsible for spreading the disease, you wouldn't have thought that when we were all running around with our torches and pitchforks about a Dallas flight. But it's not responsible for spreading the disease. In fact, we can hamper our ability to understand the disease, define the problem and tackle it if we curtail international travel. That's a very clear message that Europe should be delivering, and I hope when it goes from the states made their ruling yesterday, it'll go back to the Commission and something more coherent will come from that.
Listen, thank you very much indeed. I appreciate you coming on the air. Eoghan Corry, travel expert. Thanks for joining.